Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where Larne in the past 7 days survived the Bell Classico gauntlet. They're sitting proud top of the league and it feels like they're the only team that can stand in their own way between them and getting league glory once again. Things aren't though as rosy across the league. Glenavon faced another loss, Ballymena continue to struggle, and the now caseless Reds potentially plunge into crisis on the pitch as an understocked and youthful side got swiped to the side at home against their County Antrim Shield Final opponents, Carrick Rangers. Let's talk about that County Antrim Shield Final as well as all the latest January transfers and more on this, your latest weekly edition of Kick and Match. It's strange because there's never really not a not fun time of the season, but we're seeing transfers flowing back and forward. We're having big games, more at the bottom of the league opposed to the top, and yada on to one big bowl. Plenty to talk about this week, and on this occasion it's going to be in the company of Ali McCalmont. Hello, Ali.
Hi, Peter. I'm glad to be back here, and yeah, maybe for once when I've been on here, it's a good news week for me. It's been a pretty good week if you're in the Ambi Army.
It was. Isn't that funny? Sometimes I'm a good boy and go, good week for your lot. Let's come round and chat. But I'm going to flip that right on a dime because there's only one place we can start. And it has been building up for a number of weeks. This is going to be a massive week in the title race. Larne first had Glentoran and then they had Linfield. They take care of business against Glentoran, both away from home as well. They beat Glentoran last Tuesday. There was a red card that helped them along that way. They stood firm, didn't let Linfield claw anything back. It was a 0-0 draw there at Windsor Park. And it is now, bar a complete collapse, a cakewalk until April for the Invermen.
Yeah, they've done what they needed to do over the past few weeks. I think when you've got that sort of buffer, you just need to make sure that your rivals can't catch up when you play them, and certainly took care of business last week against the Glens. A bit iffy on the red card. Was a red card. It was an absolute stonewall red card, that one. But I think again
we're going to Stonewall levels straight away, are we?
Yes, straight into Stonewall level. Yeah, I think the biggest problem for Glentoran fans was there wasn't an equalising one at just before half time. But I think Larne were played quite well that night and take care of business there. Not so much on Friday. I think they were in just damage limitation mode there on Friday. And look, every manager goes on about fixture this when it doesn't suit them, but a little bit difficult there to play on Tuesday, and I know Linfield had a game as well. Both teams actually, and I think it played out with the game. They were all a little bit tired, and the energy wasn't in the game, even though it was the top of the table. No, so I say at top of the table. There's a big clash there that could define the season. If Linfield get a win there, it could have just kick-started their season back into. And we all talk about it, that it takes a couple of wins here for Linfield and a couple of defeats for Larne and all. Suddenly it's back on again. And if they'd have got that win on Friday, it might have just kick-started them again and taken a wee bit of the wind out of Larne's sails. But I do think both teams were a bit cream-crackered from Tuesday. Linfield had played at Carrick, lost a man after about 30 minutes and had to sort of weather that with 10 men on a heavy pitch, and then having to go again on Friday in a big game. And I think that played out in the game itself. It was another one of those Friday nights, which I'm afraid we've had one too many of this season, where they're a bit difficult to watch, and possibly just the last 10 minutes, maybe Linfield could have nicked it. But the keeper stood up again. Ron Ferguson's been outstanding for Larne for a good few seasons now, and he made a couple of saves late on, which just kept that at 0-0. And I think Larne undoubtedly would be walking out of that sort of Windsor thinking that was job done there, and we didn't lose the points and kept that distance certainly between them and the Blues. Okay, Coleraine eventually pick up a couple of points over the weekend, but I think Larne are happy to keep Linfield at arm's length there with the game. And to be honest with you, there's nothing really great in the game to talk about, bar maybe Gary Haveron's chat about the pitch afterwards. He wasn't best pleased about the pitch.
We're back there again. I feel like going into that week, the bigger game of the two was Glentoran against Larne. Glens were on a decent run themselves, albeit the weather had somewhat put a pin in their momentum. It's not a great start. It's a penalty within 7 minutes due to a handball judged by the referee, which look at these things come and they go. You feel quite strongly about the red card. I don't know if I do feel as strongly about it. Declan Devine definitely wasn't happy, but in such a big game, it was going to be a tough task. 11 on 11. Once it's down to 10 men with the guts of realistically an hour of play to go, you felt there was only really going to be one result. I know it was it 1-1 at the time, but from there, the team in Larne, who looked fitter than everybody else, looked more composed than anybody else, really have that experience to battle in big games. They have got players who can do that better than anybody else, and they're the team sitting at the top of the league with points, with actually games in hand here. And it ultimately was an opportunity missed for Glentoran on Tuesday night. However, you look past past 10, 12 games that they have had, they could and probably should be a lot more closer. And it's not a dodgy red card or maybe a 50-50 penalty that didn't go their way, which has put them massively behind the 8 ball when it comes to the title race.
Yeah, I think the rest of them, I think you nailed it there in terms of Larne have just got the job done. I watched them on Boxing Day at Taylor's Avenue. I was doing the game at Taylor's Avenue, and for 80 minutes I was highly underwhelmed by Larne, and I think the Larne fans were a bit worried that they were going to go under on that Boxing Day derby. But they just found a way. They took a shot from outside the box, which almost trickled into the corner from Tiernan O'Connor. Any other day that doesn't go in. It was really one of those toppers. And then the next minute they just get the wind again and nick another one and win the game 2-1. And that to me is what Larne have been about this season. I don't think they've been at a level where Larne teams over the past few years have been. But at the end of the day, that'll not matter. If you're picking up wins, we said, geez, I think we were on last year. I was on with you last year and we were talking about the worst Linfield side, and just everybody talking about the worst Linfields. They won the league. They won the league.
And you'll never guess what's happening this year.
Yeah.
Apparently, this is now the worst team.
This is now the worst Linfield team that we've ever seen. Yada yada yada. Yeah. And look, I don't think, as I say, they're the Larne side are on a patch of where they were, but they're getting the job done, and I think the other teams just aren't. They're just not doing it. And you've mentioned there, Glentoran can play out a performance like the 7-0 and beat Linfield at will nearly every time now, but they just can't get those run of momentum. They look good for 3 or 4 weeks, and then suddenly, lose a game here and there, which they really shouldn't, and that just again just pops the balloon a little bit. And Larne have been the opposite. They've been managing to pick up points consistently throughout the season. And again, I think I read over the weekend there, and obviously with my fantasy football hat on, 15 clean sheets, I think, for Larne now.
10 goals conceded all season in the league.
It's sensational. 10. Yeah, it's sensational. And again, I've just mentioned Ron Ferguson. He's top keeper in the fantasy league by an absolute mile. I think he's got 100 points in that now. He's just 7 points every week. And if you ain't got him in your team, you're done for. Because he's been fantastic. Again, just on Freddie was just a perfect example. He did nothing for 80 minutes and then is just able to keep that out at the end there, to keep the clean sheet for Larne. And that to me is the difference. And look, it can change. I mean, the Coleraine coming back there, it can change. I'm not in the same sort of camp as yourself in terms of it's done and dusted. I do think there's a wee bit that could still happen, but I think the difference is Larne have got a few mistakes in them. They can make a few mistakes, whereas the rest, it's pretty much win out now, and you've got to go and win all the games. And what could happen is those teams in 2, 3, and 4 and 5 could well beat each other, and then it's pretty much handing it to Larne then, But as I said, I wouldn't be completely on the it's Larne's to lose and all that sort of stuff, and but they're in the box seat. But I think there's a few twists and turns to come.
We'll have to see. I think that game you referenced there on Boxing Day, that one where they were down and out away from home against Carrick, the fact that they were able to come back and not only secure not a defeat, but actually go on and win the game, that was where I felt this team is different gravy, actually, compared to just somebody who is getting the job done week to week. They have fortitude, they have the ability to push on and take everybody else and put them to the sword. And it was a tough week here, both away from home, and they're sitting pretty. It isn't all 6 points, but it didn't need to be. And just on Ferguson there, I'm starting to think beyond just the title and the next few weeks and what is it? We've got, let's say, 15 games or so to
Mm.
play and the split and everything else, right? So still plenty of games to play, right? And we've had a few spells where there's been players who have stolen all the headlines. You go, what a player. You can listen back to the half team of the season a couple of weeks ago that this podcast did with the boys from around the grounds. And I'm not saying he's the front runner. I would say he's probably in the top three. But when you're thinking of player of the year, and there's still plenty of football to be played, Ferguson's in with a shout this season.
I agree. And look, I think it's well documented in players of the season right throughout the world. Very few defenders, and even less goalkeepers, really, get thrown up for that sort of thing. But I would take you all the way back. I'll show my vintage here, back to the great Brian Clough whenever he was taking over at Forest. The first thing he did was go and buy Peter Shilton because he knew if I get a keeper in here and we're keeping clean sheets every week, we only need to bang one and we win games. And true to form, that's exactly what Peter Shilton did. He was fantastic for Forest. And I'm not saying he's Peter Shilton, Rowan Ferguson, but he's certainly doing the business for Larne. And it's not just a one season thing. He's done it for a good few seasons now. But I'd agree with you. You know, if you actually look at the contribution he brings into that team. And we don't often talk about the points that he earns because he's not the guy up top that wins you the game in the last minute. But the saves that he made there, for example, on Friday, just is really crucial because not only does it gain you the point, it makes sure that the team that's in effect chasing you in Linfield doesn't gain those three, and it's a big swing there. So little things like that should be highlighted maybe a little bit more by the likes of us and chatting about it. I think he's been fantastic for Larne. And add in then. I didn't really mention it, but he came back on that game in Boxing Day. Leroy Miller's back in, Andy Ryan's back in now, so maybe they're just getting the band back together again, getting that a bit of that team back together again. But that's probably going against what I said earlier. They're getting a few players back and a strong back line again, which they've always had. I'm talking myself into it being over again.
Look, if it isn't going to be a situation where the Gibson Cups is back at Inver Park, I think you're right. It can't be all three of these other, let's say, top four full-time teams and the Glens Blues and Coleraine. All of them can't do it. One of them's going to have to push in through the middle
Yeah.
there. You would probably say, outside of the fact that it was vital for Linfield and the other teams for them to get a result to try and reroute that swing back to them momentum wise. They did give it a go late on. It was another turgid affair at Windsor Park. We've seen this time and time again between these two sides, and we were highlighting Ferguson there. They survive a late barrage, but to be honest, it's been a difficult couple of weeks for Linfield, and I don't think even if they had stole a result there or sneaked it at the end, I don't think it really changes what's going to be an interesting couple of weeks for the Blues on how they set themselves up to, one, try and gain Europe this season, but also start building for next year. Because I think if you look at the business, particularly Coleraine is doing, I think next season's starting right now.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it's interesting to hear what's going on at Linfield. I think the fans are clearly unhappy, not just with what's happening on the pitch, with what's happening off the pitch. Obviously, the boycott that they're talking about coming up with the cup game, and the rescheduling of fixtures and things like that. It's just not a happy camp at the minute and in general. And you see David Healy even in his interview after the game on Tuesday, and even more so against Bangor in the cup. I was really taken aback by his interview after the Bangor game, which they won 1-0, okay, but he was quite scathing of his team. If you remember, they'd beaten Bangor 6 the week before, but probably that game probably should have ended a draw and gone to extra time, or maybe even penalties, but they sneaked through, and he was quite scathing of his team, saying, I actually remember the quote because I'd watched it, they were coming to Taylor's Avenue on Tuesday. I remember him saying, if we turn up like that on Tuesday, we will get beat. And they it came to, and obviously the game was changed quite a lot when the 30 odd minute Josh Archer was sent off, and it changed to a different game for Linfield, but they never really looked like a Linfield of old for me, where even at 10 men against 11, they would have still gone for it, and they didn't really threaten at all. And I get the 10 men sort of thing, but as I say, I just thought that Linfield might have still gone for it, especially in the situation that they're in at the minute. Draws are no good. I mean, you'd nearly rather taking a defeat going for it that night. We've got to get wins here to try and close this gap. And if they'd have picked up that win on Tuesday and then gone and beaten Larne, well, the ball's back in their court a little bit. But again, just a point at Taylor's Avenue and a point on Friday. And it just doesn't look a happy place at the minute. Well, the manager's settled still. Has the Scottish rumours died down now a wee bit? The jobs aren't there anymore. And I always think back as does he always have that in the back of his head now that I could every time he's getting a bit of tap from the stands or whatever that we are not playing well. Should I have gone? I don't know, but it just doesn't look a happy place at the minute on and off the pitch.
I definitely think that the way Linfield are set up now, you look at that overall squad and you compare it to others, and it's something I really want to look into over the next few weeks here. And that I think the Linfield rebuild, and I think I'm not the only person using that kind of language when it comes to them trying to go for the title. It's a really big task. It's going to be all about recruitment. It's going to be about development. And I wonder, with Cal Morrison, that saga finally being over with the Blues, him going back to Scotland, and look, you can't help the fact that Offord's injured, but is that going to signal the end of Linfield's big spending? Because they did it last year, they sailed on to the title, they were hoping to do the business early in January so they could keep up the momentum this year, and actually they've looked stagnant from a squad, and a lot of the players that they were relying to step up haven't. And do they fix that by, they've signed a defender from the League of Ireland? I've seen criticism online that maybe Linfield don't look in that market enough, and they're always looking at Scotland, and if they are looking at Scotland, are they putting enough scouts there? Like, the task at hand, when you have, I think, a really well settled Larne side with youth that look really solid, and there's players coming in, and that's without them looking in the summer and bringing in investment with potential Champions League and then extra money coming their way. You have Coleraine, who is picking up the midfield captain from a former League of Ireland, champions in Shelburne, and what else they're looking to do that they've been building up there. Glens, they don't seem to be, playing in the absolute same ballpark, but they're taking him alone. They're taking in Ben Gallagher, who they'll look to develop. Linfield can't stand still, but we haven't seen them like this before, have we? We've never seen Linfield where they're so far behind, and they're going into next year. Maybe they claim they can't spend the money. Is the people in charge the right people to spend the money? They've went for youth at times, but we've talked about players here before, like Yates and others, and even Charlie Allen's getting more of a go in the team. They haven't always worked out. Cal Morrison didn't work out either, so it's a big job.
Yeah, look at sometimes it is difficult. Obviously, the signing of Kieran Offer was the huge big effort this year to get the guy up front and maybe play him alongside Fitzpatrick, and he started like a house on fire. He was looking like the guy that was gonna do it for them. Injured, and that takes it away. Straight away you can't play, so you got to look elsewhere. But you kind of put all your eggs in that basket a little bit because you didn't strengthen elsewhere. And you're right. For me, I've grown up with the big two in the 80s, and that was it, really. It was Glentoran, Linfield, and then Linfield as Glentoran dropped away a little bit, Linfield always sort of stayed around there, and we're still the biggest club in the country, and I still think they are the biggest club in the country. But in terms of financial muscle now, are they now the fourth best team? Larne, Coleraine, Glentoran, certainly Coleraine are blowing everybody the water. That signing from Shelford is just ratcheted it up again. Taking somebody from a League of Ireland who was their captain and real linchpin. So yeah, Linfield now, I do think it's a really good point you make in terms of what's the next step for Linfield. Are they going to sort of, I mean, obviously there's no talk of investment at Linfield or any of that sort of thing. It's always just been Linfield stick to their own and do what they need to do. But if a young player comes through it, well, whatever, Bangor, Carrick, the lesser sort of, and wanted to move somewhere now, where's the first place they're going to look now? And it would always have been Linfield. That would have been the first port of call. Are Linfield looking at me? Any scouts down from Linfield, are they looking? No, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure they'd be top of the list, and that's a worrying sort of time for Linfield. They always had that calling card that if you want to come here, we'll welcome you. But now there'll be other teams on the radar now for sure for a young talent. At the end of the season, you'd always look down and say, well, who was this season's Benji McGee, for example, or who was this season's young player who came through and where's he going to go to? Now, as you saw with Benji McGee, he went to Larne, and the next one might go to Coleraine, and things like that. Just whereas always it was our Linfield looking at me, and I don't think that's the case anymore. So do they have to? Do the Linfield board and management structure have to turn that on its head now and bring through youth again, really, and try and build from scratch again, or do they go the other way and say, right, we've got to compete here?
Oftentimes the standard, and this is a positive, the standard of youth coming through Linfield has been so high that to the point where they're rarely even seeing the first team. You saw Orr last year getting in, but the time he did good stuff, he was away. And you might be a Cliftonville fan listening to that and going, well, yeah, it feels like anytime we're doing good, our players go, and then we're starting all over again. And it's these are not always sure rules of the dice. And I wonder with Linfield, is next season gone already? That may sound ridiculous, but is next season gone already? Is the job so significant, and perhaps the money not being there to really change it significantly? Are they better trying to establish something that can really ride into, I know it sounds massive, 27, 28, rather than trying to have quick fixes and expecting youth players to step up big? It's going to be something that comes up, I think, a lot over the next couple of weeks, especially if when it comes to the title race, things are going to die down. On that game, though, against Carrick. Yeah.
Just on that point then, just on that point you make there, I mean, do you think the manager wants to do that? Do you think the manager would be sat down today and said, right, David, we're not gonna win it this year for sure. We actually don't think we're gonna win it next year. We need you to start a plan here for 27, 28. Do you think David Healy would be up for that, to build another team?
Well, you look at the Glens, right? And the Glens, I guess, have always been, people have suggested that they've looked quite short term. Like we saw the big investment before. Like they obviously tried to win the league, and you can't constantly aim for 2 seasons away. But sometimes it's better to build a wee bit. Like you might even say, look what Larne did last year. What was Benji
Yeah.
McGee? I'm getting my timelines mixed up there. Benji McGee was not going to be an impact player straight away. O'Connor, they took time with Lusty and a few other people. That has paid dividends now, and you might say that actually the situation Linfield are in this year is because they backed the team that won the championship last year too much, and could have been more ruthless or whatever it may be. You can go, I don't want to be told that I have to wait a year or before even challenging, but then you get caught up in the situation where it's this is our year, this is our year, this is our year, and it's constant quick fixes where the other team have just
Yeah.
nurtured their crop nicely and are blooming all at once. And ultimately that's what you need to be. You need to be in a situation where everything is blooming all at once. It didn't come together for Larne straight away. It did take a few more seasons. So what they tell the fans and what they're doing behind the scenes might be two different things. But on that game there, because if this Linfield was sitting here with, let's say, 6 points after the past 7 days, maybe things could have felt a wee bit differently. It wasn't the case, as I said. 2 draws there, 0 goals. Was Lecky a lucky boy to stay on the pitch with that elbow against Hall?
Well, I mean, I called shitty one on Tuesday, a bit of a stonewall one, but I'll be honest, I'll pull the Arsene Wenger and say I was at the game. I'm quite
That's
up
it.
high, and I didn't actually see. I didn't see it. I actually didn't see it because I was looking elsewhere. But the Linfield bench were pretty adamant. Very similar to the Manchester derby on Saturday. The blue team were pretty adamant that was a red card. But the referee gave a yellow straight away. And there was actually an interesting one at Taylor's Avenue a couple of weeks back when the 7-0 against Glentoran. Reece Glendenning was actually, I don't know if this was well reported, but he was given a yellow card initially and then a red card straight away. So it wasn't 2 yellows. He was given a yellow. And I think they actually appealed that on, the fact that it wasn't protocol. So as soon as he'd given the yellow to Lecky, I think he was getting away with it in inverted commas, but Healy was quite adamant that that was a red and mentioned it again post match. I didn't think it was too much in it, but then again, I suppose with the amber tinted glasses, I might be saying that. But obviously, it was a bit exacerbated whenever Linfield got their own red card, and that turned out to be probably the right way of going actually, because he pulled Heatley down just outside the box, and the free kick came to nothing. But one, you let him go on because he was clean through and probably would have got a shot away if he misses it. Everybody said leave him alone, but at the minute he just made a split second decision to pull him down just outside the box. And the old one, if he goes into the box and gets pulled down, it's a penalty, so he doesn't go off. What do you do? And he just instinct, I think, just pulled him down. And as it turned out, it just petered out into a 0-0 then. So, like Linfield, I mean, there was more of a thing actually, and the Linfield fans will say this, there was more of a thing actually with a penalty in the first half where definitely started outside the box, but he was definitely still holding the Linfield player in the box, and when he went down, and the referee gave it as a free kick outside the box, and that to me was the bigger decision that was wrong. Me saying that with a Carrick Rangers hat on, but that to me was the poorer decision rather than the red card that Linfield maybe would have had a bigger gripe about. Was I thought that may have been a penalty, but didn't go their way. And as I said earlier, I don't think they really did enough in the game, even with 10 men. They didn't really try to win the game for me. Even though they had 10 men with those exceptions, I just didn't think they did
Well,
enough
it
on the
must be
night.
said, and I've said it over the past few weeks here when it comes to Carrick Rangers. Let's talk about your boys. Winless in the league since Halloween. Injuries galore,
Yeah.
including at some key positions like goalkeeper. We don't know how long Gartside's going to be out. That seems to be a bit of a nasty one there. You have a team of players who are well weathered, and that means that they're not always playing every single game. And you wondered, were they starting to lose a tiny bit of steam, especially when oftentimes you were doing well in games and then you're losing it at the end. Okay. And then you get a good result against Linfield. Baxter saying should have got more. And then I was at your matchup against Cliftonville, your dance partners for Tuesday night in the County Antrim Shield Final. And it must be said, for the first 20 minutes, I thought you were in trouble. But you look at the box score at the end, 4-1. It's all coming together all of a sudden once again. You're still 11th in the league, but you've got a game in hand over the other teams in front of you. That's a massive mood booster in the Carrick camp.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you why as well, because obviously we had the thing about playing Cliftonville 2 or 3 days before a cup final, and look, let's be honest, probably the cup final is a bigger thing for Carrick Rangers than it is for Cliftonville. Cliftonville haven't been to two Irish Cup finals and things like that. I'm not saying it's not a big deal for Cliftonville, but certainly for a team like Carrick Rangers to get to a final, it's a big thing. So in a way, we didn't really want to be playing Cliftonville 3 or 4 days and before the final, and obviously the hangover of that and all that sort of stuff. But as it turns out, they're going to get a win. But around about 3:30, I wasn't at the game on Saturday. But at 3:30, when I was checking the scores, and obviously the Crews had just scored, and Glenavon were still 0-0, and we go 1-0 down pretty early to Cliftonville. You're thinking this could be a real bad day here if Glenavon were to nick one and we stay behind, the Crews win. It's not looking good here. And literally 3 minutes before half time, everything just went completely, completely the other way. Um,
I was doing a report around halftime, and if there wasn't for a header from a nothing corner, I was going to say Carrick have done nothing. They have literally
yeah,
done not. They have not made that keeper do a single save once, and then by the time halftime rolls around, I'm talking about 3-1. And
yeah, it's the old Wednesday night when you've got your report written and
yeah,
you're trying to get it in for the last sort of print for Thursday morning, and there's three goals in the last minute. Scrap all
like
that.
it's the type of game where every fan of a top team is talking about Danny Gibson again. I asked
Yeah,
after the game, Baxter said, "Is that the best game you've seen him play in a Carrick shirt?" And he goes, "Well, since I've been manager, yes, but." All the Reds fans I was talking to afterward going, "Oh, that's why do we not have a striker like that?" He hasn't been playing up to that level. It's the top level for the majority of this season, but when he's firing, he is, I think, your best player. And I know trying to fit him in as he like centrally up top? Does he play slightly wide because he's got that speed, and he showed that there in that second goal to Heatley, just beating a defender, or just a cool little cross towards him. It was a dominant performance. I've got a lot to say about Cliftonville here as well, but I was starting to wonder, were Carrick going to rev back up to try and make sure themselves they can push on and stay away from 11th. There's plenty more games to go, and there's going to be some really fascinating matchups between yourselves, Ballymena, Crews, Ports, even maybe Bangor, but everything to play for, and staying away from 11th feels like one of the more interesting storylines now for the next few weeks.
Yeah, it might well be. It might well be the 11th thing could be the thing that keeps us going towards the end of the season. Hopefully not, that it does tighten up at both sides of it. But the 11th could be the thing. And you're right, there could be a few good games there coming up. In terms of Saturday, there was it just a change of personnel. In term, he had mentioned that Adam Leckie had played quite a lot of football. As I think they were down. Every single manager complains about injuries when they're not winning, etc. But I think they were down to a bit of bare bones before the January window, and they've got a few in. And I think players had played game in, game out for quite a while. And as has been well documented, they're not the youngest squad in the Irish League. There's a few older hands there who have been very, very good, to be fair. But playing week in, week out for a long period, and just that Christmas period as well, where there's like 2 or 3 games in a row, I think it was taking its toll, and he took Lecky out on Saturday and put Danny Gibson up top into his old number 9 role, and he was fantastic in that sort of spell from about 40 minutes onwards into the second half, and he got his hat trick over what a period of just either side of half time. And he really played on the shoulders of the Cliftonville defenders and had that pace and a little bit of. He mentioned in his own interview after the game, he just had that sort of physicality. He doesn't look like a big physical front man, but he does play with the smarts that he can just get in front of people and bump them with his shoulder. So it's a dilemma for Baxter on Tuesday. Does he bring Adam Leckie back in and switch Danny Gibson back out to the right where he's been playing? Not as effectively as he was on Saturday. So a good problem to have for the manager. There's competition for places up top. Paul Heatley's still doing what Paul Heatley does. He's still as quick as anybody, 38 years of age, and he's still sharp around the box, and probably could have a few more goals than he does, but he's still got that nippiness that he's always had. You think surely that's going to be disappearing soon, but he's still got that. And there are a couple of signings that have come in. Mikey Place has played the last few weeks, and I really like the look of Olasunde. You would have seen him firsthand on Saturday, and I like the look of him as well. With the guys that have been there, we've lost Shannon Clucas again, just back for one game, lost him. The keeper, you're right, is out for a while now, and we had to sort of rely on Scott Pengelly for a while now. And we've got Lord Donnelly in now, but yeah, Guardside's going to be out for a wee while. He's got a torn muscle, I think, so that's not good for a keeper. So yeah, the injuries are there, but that result is really going to should give them some confidence, even though they've been playing well. They haven't been getting results. I think I said to you before we came on here, we led in every single game in December and didn't win any of them. So that's not a great stat to have, but a big result on Saturday.
I'll add in, particularly down near the bottom of the table where squads are limited. Scott goes after being an important player at the start of the season. Callagher was injured for a while there. Michaelitis has pretty much been injured all season. I don't see Wade. I don't know if he's got a knock.
Wade's just come back. We had a game there against the Glens. Came back into the team against the Glens and lasted 10 minutes. So he went off in that game as well. Nedis Michaelitis is out for the season.
Yeah.
So he's done his cruciate. So
like I said,
so it was difficult. Was difficult for a little while there. Yeah, Jimmy Gallagher's back now. He's played a few games back, and Luke McCulloch obviously is to me the standout player in that team. I mean, you say Danny Gibson, but Luke McCulloch to me, I do the announcing at the games, and I do the Carrick man of the match every single week. I got this stage there about 4 or 5 games at home in a row, and we just went, we're not giving it to him again. He's imperious at the back. He's as good as there is I've seen at the back for a long time. Calmness on the ball, brave, and I think he can still play at the top level in this league. I think he's a standout player for us, and if we lost him, I think that would be a real major blow. But I could stand to be corrected here by the stats guys, but I think he's played every game this season, and he's been brilliant for us.
Well, you said there you needed numbers in. You've got them. Mikey Place comes in. wing back on the right hand side, Matthew Sunday. You also add in Joseph Moore, so Logan
Come here.
Donnelly, as a goalkeeper. So it's bodies as well as you hope a bit of quality, and
Yeah.
it's nice still to have Lecky relatively healthy when he can be. I mean, to win that game and not have Aiden Steele in midfield, I thought was very impressive. But legitimately, if you're watching this game, and I think Reds fans will know exactly what I'm talking about, Cliftonville looked so sharp, so fluid. They were passing the ball about very sweetly. Now, I know for the past few seasons, this is what Cliftonville do, and they don't always knock it into the back of the net, right? They can be pretty but ineffective. But genuinely, I thought for the first half an hour on Saturday, they're going to tear you to shreds. They didn't. I almost felt as though some of the attackers for Cliftonville weren't even taking it too seriously when they had their chances, just throwing their leg at the ball, going, no, another one will come. But they were shell shocked. Now you talk about how big potentially the idea if you had to lose Luke McCulloch, how that would impact your back line. Oh boy, Cliftonville. This is not good when it comes to their defense, because I mean, only a couple of weeks ago I was hyping up this wonderful tandem that they had, and you mix in other players around them of Jack Keeney and Oren Casey. We all know that I was not the only person hyping up Oren Casey. He is the first ever player to go for six figures to the League of Ireland. That's big
Yeah.
dough. So they see him as a young, dynamic centre back that can move in the midfield, that can shift, even do some stuff out wide, right? You have Jack Keeney, who scored a huge amount of goals from defense this year. By all accounts, he's gone. He's going to America away with Roscoe. So you lose Casey and Keeney. There was no Addis on Saturday. He's had a few ups and downs when it comes to injuries as well over the past few years. I know this year was not a let's go for the title type season, but if you're a Reds fan, just after that horrid start to the season, things were looking on the up. You still have this dark, murky cloud of takeover. What takeover? And you're getting battered at home. Like that's what it was. It was a battering, and it was naive. And I think I want to say the youth players that were there, and they were young. It was a very young Cliftonville side that were there. You can see that there was talent and there's ability and there's potential. But when they came up against the wily veterans in Carrick, they were pushed aside. Like, you look at the penalty, that's a 16, 17-year-old playing centre back.
Yeah.
As much as I think everybody, write down, remember when Peter told you about Shea McGarry, that fella has the frame. He looks all of 6 foot and composure on the ball. He's still 16, 17-year-old playing against one of the best forwards in the league, and Danny Gibson. I know it wasn't
Yeah.
Danny who gave away the he got the penalty, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. He's up again, as I just mentioned there, a guy that's played around the leagues for quite a while now, has got that know-how, and sometimes it's not just you're a talent in professional football. I call it professional football, which is what we're in. It's your nous as well. As I say, Paul Heatley's got the nous. Every single fan across the country will know what I'm talking about. He's got that nous, when how to win free kicks, how to get his body in front of backmen, or defenders rather. And yes, at 16, 17-year-old, you're playing in a level that you don't see that week in, week out. I mean, you've got a guy who's trying to just get in front of you and you foul him, and sort of trying to get the ball, just not naively, but you're just so much willingness to try and go and get the ball. And you've got a guy like Heatley and Gibson who have been round the block. And yeah, I totally agree with you. But I think that's what you're going to get with Cliftonville. I think the fans have just got to accept that. We've talked earlier on about if Linfield are going to try and do a rebuild and go with youth, you're going to get this. You're going to get really inconsistent periods of play where you're brilliant one week and you think we've really got something going here. We've got our very own class of 92 or whatever. We've got 4 or 5 kids coming through here who are brilliant. You're going to get periods of where they're not brilliant, and you're going to lose games like they did on Saturday. And you're right, the back line is a worry then. And going into Tuesday, we're back on a artificial surface again, which I think actually suits Carrick's game a wee bit. The artificial surface. So, we need a backline in there, and I think that's Carrick's strength now is the wiliness, the nous of the game up against a young Cliftonville side, and how they come out of Saturday. I'm not so sure, and like you mentioned, you've thrown it up there. Cliftonville. We talked about the problems off the field at Linfield. By God, I think Monday. There's a big meeting on Monday about this, this takeover. And if ever there was a bad time for a general meeting, it's Monday, day before a cup final. It's got bad vibes written all over it. And then if that comes out, and I'm sure the press corps will be there taking notes and whatnot of what comes out of this. And if there's upheaval in the boardroom or whatever, it's bound to spill over onto the pitch on Tuesday. It just is. It's not something that you want to be talking about day of a cup final. If there's a big meeting on Monday and something comes out of it, that's what will be in the press. It'll not be, how Linfield, or sorry, how Cliftonville going to beat Carrick Rangers tonight. It's going to be, is the Toronto group going to take over? Is Kieran Horn going to go? So all be talk about this general meeting that they're having on Monday rather than all the focus going on trying to win the County Antrim Shield. So look, at the minute, that's not a good bit of timing for Cliftonville for me, and obviously on the back of a pretty heavy defeat to the team that they're playing on Tuesday. They could spin it around and go and play fantastically on Tuesday and win the game 3 or 4-0, but just the vibes are not great, and sometimes vibes transfer into a football match.
I I'm surprised I'm saying this, especially if you were to talk to me 2 weeks ago, but you would argue maybe add in a bit of the Baxter at Seaview kind of feel as well. Add that as a card to his pack, but you gotta say Cliftonville look like the favourites unless you get a few of those names back. Hale wasn't even in the squad at all. Neither was Addis, I believe either. Maybe they can make a bit of a recovery. Katie play one more game before he goes to America. But just to highlight this squad, and look, I saw bright moments from these players. Fapatu, 21. We all like the idea of Joe Sheridan. 18, Keeving Hawthorne been playing lots of games, 18. You can't expect them to do wonders. The new signings, Healy got the goal. Like he's settled in wonderfully already there, but still a few things just to sharpen up there. McStravik's back, 21. You have, of course, Gormley and others to come off the bench, but it's not the long term there. Same for even Addis. So it's a team that's gonna be in flux. But in turn, how can they? Because I'm sure right now there's teams looking. We know that they're looking towards the summer already. We're hearing about these pre-contracts.
Yeah.
Are Cliftonville even in a position where they can offer anybody anything pre-contract wise to say, hey, come to us and here's some money? Like they're obviously going for players, or they've brought people in, but when it comes to pre-contracts, are people going to commit to Cliftonville, especially at the level where they can go back up to being a top six side? Because I think that's what they need to do first. Establish that they're back in the top six first, and then they can do it. They have the talent. But as you know, I don't want to be. You can't win nothing with kids. It may be the case on Tuesday. We'll have to see, but you must feel pretty confident. Elsewhere there on Saturday, it wasn't the only thumping, and it looked like it could have been something very different as well, based at halftime there for the Crews. But Coleraine remembered they're very good, and and it's all the famous names of Coleraine doing their thing and getting the goals, and it does just show when they click, when they settle into their groove. This is a mightily talented team. Sorry, David Jeffrey, mightily talented.
Yes, Mr. Cooper et al. Certainly clicked into gear in the second half on Saturday. But as I sort of mentioned earlier, at one stage it was looking pretty precarious for Carrick fans because the Crews had gone ahead, Brighton getting another goal. And even when they got back to 1-1, I think Crews had a penalty which was missed, and if they'd have got ahead again, Coleraine, that's their one thing this season is they have been a little bit brittle when they go behind and trying to come back. Sometimes, obviously, they've done it against Carrick a couple of times, actually come back to win. But just generally, they've dropped points when they shouldn't. And again, that would have been another sort of off the back of Friday night when there was a little glimmer of hope with Larne only picking up a point. They really needed to get that win. But yeah, Cooper stepped up, Shevlin again, and Connolly sort of getting his goal as well. But yeah, they sort of steamroller the Crews in the second half, and they do sort of play in that sort of 15, 20 minute spell where they're unstoppable, they seem to be. And if they get into that zone, they can score 3 or 4 in that 15, 20 minute period. They do seem to be that sort of team, but doing it for 90 minutes and holding on, that's the difference for me between them and a Larne at the minute. I probably, if the two teams play at their absolute ultimum, I think Coleraine would probably be the better team, but Larne win the games. They just are able to see out games and are more consistent over a season so far anyway, and picking up points when Coleraine are dropping them when they shouldn't. But if you were asking me who would be the better team at their peak, I would say Coleraine would be, but they're just not doing it for enough in games and winning games. I mean, as I say, they were in a wee bit of trouble there on Saturday, but that 20-minute spell killed the game and killed off the Cruise.
It's talent over teamwork.
A
You
little
see
bit of
all
that,
these
yeah.
goals, it's individual moments, it's nice movement, but what's letting them down is communication, and it's what many people were pointing towards why they thought me suggesting that Coleraine were going to win the league this year was, you know, quite foolish, because they just don't have that set in system just yet that they know each other. Like, look, that's probably the big thing about Larne. It is just teamwork over talent, and we may see that come using these next few months to really build themselves up so they are more formidable at the back, so they aren't making these decisions or these wrong missteps. But look at that.
Yeah.
Patching's ability on the ball. Cooper is a difference maker. Shevlin is always dangerous. Then the players you can bring on to do something is just totally remarkable. And it does look like, unfortunately, there's been too many slip ups for them to really get the big one this year. But they're in all the cups, so we'll see how it all comes and goes.
Not until the next round
For
of
the
the cup,
Cruise,
there, Peter. I guess
yeah.
you'd have gotten the next round of
Well,
the cup.
well, your wily boys will show them how it's going. Like, if you're the Cruise, like you play the same team twice, one of the better teams in the division, and you're on the wrong end of it both times. This second time, slightly more emphatic. Like, this will not be the game that will decide their fate this year. It's very clear over the next few months. I do think if you're a Cruise fan, you're shaking my hand for 10th, and that might be quite depressing of where they are. Again, a team where there's lots of question marks of where they're going and on what they're doing. However, it feels like perhaps that they're finding their feet again. I know they had that nice little spell, maybe it was November-ish time, but look, it's all to play for, and I'm sure teams will go up and down in form. But for the Cruise, you look at the games that are coming up for them next: Linfield, Harsh, Larne the week after. Maybe they've got to worry maybe about where February sets them up again. But they have got a lot to play for
Yeah,
here.
very similar sort of thing to Cliftonville, in that they've got a lot of they started that rebuild last year of moving away from Baxter Ball, if you want to call it that they'd had such a successful time with. They moved on from him, brought in a young coach who knew the club. We've heard that quite a lot over this weekend. He knows the club, so Goodell comes in and wants to change the ethos. And a lot of people said he should have started it even earlier, but it's that sort of ethos has started to kick in this year. And again, young players. He's got quick young players. We've talked about it quite a lot, who on their day can really go at teams at the back. And I mean, young Dunlop's as quick as I've seen boys been. He's like lightning. But it's just end product. Can they get Braden's been fantastic, but they brought in Brooks as well. He hasn't been as prolific as Braden, but that's what I'm talking about. Obviously, people start to talk now. You've got a team in 10th position, and Braden's almost top scorer. I'm sure he is top scorer anymore. But he's at the top of the charts. You know, he's up and around there. They're already talking about him leaving and where he's going back to Scotland, or a bigger team in Northern Ireland picking him up or whatever. So that's the level they're at. It can be very good, but I think their Achilles heel is their back line. You know, they're shipping goals left, right, and centre. I think that's their Achilles heel. And you know, they've changed goalkeepers a few times now. I think the bag has started, and then Tuffy came back in, had that good run like you mentioned, and then Tuffy's been changed again. And on Saturday there were a few sort of comical goals. The last couple were a bit comical, you know. But I think that's the I think they've got to get back to a bit more solidity at the back, and I think those boys up front can get them enough to just keep them in that 10th position. Obviously, as a Carrick fan, I hope that they don't stay in 10th position, but I think he needs to get back to some sort of solidity at the back. Maybe not even keeping clean sheets, but conceding one at most, because at the minute those boys up top, Braden's going to have to get two or three here. to keep them in games. And, even though they got the one, if they'd have converted that penalty, they might have got something out of the game on Saturday. But it's going to be a real tough run through the Crusaders, and I think the fans have just got to grin and bear this one, and try and stick at it, and keep them in the league this year.
You could probably look at outside of those Coleraine games, like look at that, win, draw, win. Like it was their best little spell of the season, but the games are getting tougher. Before I kind of talk about the other games that did happen on Saturday and over the weekend, I just want to set the tone of where we are in the league right now. Glenavon are still bottom, and all of these teams, bar Carrick, have played 24 games. Carrick having played 23, so we're almost getting to an all even field when it comes to it. Glenavon 12th with 12 points, 11 points from 11th. When it comes to Carrick, they have 23, Cruise on 24, Ballymena 25, Portadown 28, and Bangor on 31. Cliftonville also have 31 points, but they have 2 games in hand. You might say, having not won a single league game in the past 5 games, you can maybe discount them, because if you did have Cliftonville the way they're set up on 24 games, maybe you could include them in this conversation, because Cliftonville are 6th there. And I'm proposing that pretty much everybody from Carrick up to Bangor with 31 points could be 11th come the end of the season. And yeah, a win or two either way could change things. But at the minute, you're starting to see teams being dragged down. I'm not saying Portadown are being dragged down. However, Ballymena only 3 points behind them. Cruise 4, Carrick 5, game in hand for Carrick. That game between Bangor and Portadown, key, I felt, just to create a little more buffer between them and those other sides. Bangor sees the initiative home. They got it. They got the goal, although if you look at the highlights, Ports looked like they got battered in Bangor that day. I know they hadn't played a game for a while. However, a very important victory for Bangor and their push for safety. They're looking good. They're probably about 2 wins away.
Yeah, yeah, wouldn't disagree with that. Two or three wins, you get to that. What are they on 31 now? So a couple of wins, you're up to
34,
30. Yeah,
pretty much there. But I think 37, you're
you're pretty
sitting
much
there
on
with cigars. Yeah,
Well, certainly in past years, if you get 37 to 40 points, you're on the beach. I think by that stage, you're done. I think that way.
lower
So
points have done it, but this is so
yeah,
close right now.
it is close, and I would actually flip, given where my team is at the minute, I would flip your quote there of saying that any team could finish 11th, any team could finish 7th of those.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I think there's the positive spin of it. We could say, well, we get the win. We've got. I think Bangor's our game in hand. That was the game that was cancelled. Bangor were winning that 1-0, by the way. Back at Taylor's Avenue, it was the day Heatley get carried away off of the injury. So I think that game could be pretty big in that as well. If Carrick at home would win that against Bangor, suddenly Concertina's up again. But yes, Bangor, big win for them. I think all these teams are going to beat each other in times. You just got to get the 3 points against the teams that are around. I know it's a real cliche, but the main takeaway for that game for me was Stephen Fallon getting the goal. Having been sort of in the wilderness
I
through
must
through
say,
injury.
I was surprised that he played. I
Yeah,
thought, he was coming in, and if he gets fit before the end, it was one of those moves where I thought, is he actually even going to start for Bangor?
yeah. Considering where they were and how well they were doing, and
Yeah.
is he gonna come into that team having been out for so long? But just getting a goal, obviously I didn't see the whole game, so I'm not sure how his overall play is. But just a lovely little run across the defender to get to the near post, and just that little flick header, into the far corner. And just good for him on a personal point of view. Great for the club, obviously, but good for him on a personal point of view, having been at the level he played at for so many years, and going to Coleraine and thinking that this was another big move, and it just didn't work out, and injuries and stuff, and now he's back playing again, which is even that, back playing again. But to get a goal,
Hmm.
just when you've started, and win the game for your new club, as it were, just a nice story if you were neutral, and
Totally.
not part of the game, so a nice story for him, and Bangor obviously keep winning the games just every so often to keep them up. You just don't want to go on that run. I think Carrick had been in it. You mentioned from Halloween, hadn't won a game since Halloween. That's now changed, but that's when you can get pulled back into it. If you just go on a run where you're not picking up a win, not even draws, If you're not picking up a win every so often, and Bangor have been really good at that. Even when, start of the season when I went to your live when everybody talked about Bangor's going to be in trouble here, but they've been really good at just picking up wins when required, and that's putting them in the position that they're in now, and a couple of wins, as you say, should keep them in the league for another year, and good on them. They've done really well.
I reckon if you offered all those teams outside of Cliftonville eighth right now, they would all take it. But
Oh,
that's what is interesting is that
absolutely
Cruz,
everyone would take
Carrick,
it.
Ballymena, Portadown, Bangor, and maybe Cliftonville fans that really did not feel good about themselves on Saturday. Uh,
Mm.
Eighth, safety, and no drama going down, but you're missing out on getting into the playoff. Yeah, you really could see any one of these teams. So it's a really bad day at the office for Portadown, a good one for Bangor. You then look at Ballymena, and they are a team that I am circling in red pen. Yes, they've got to change a manager. Yes, they're bringing in lots of players, but the results really aren't changing at all. And Dungannon are can be decisive at home, and it didn't happen straight away, but they did what they did, and they won out. And for Ballymena, there are fresh elements to this team with the new manager, but you're right. They need to start picking up wins here or there. Boxing Day looks like a
A long time ago.
doesn't it? It feels a long time ago. It feels totally off the cuff. And they've got Larne in the cup as well. That no,
Yeah.
that's going to be their ultimate destiny. A bit of Irish Cup, maybe it could be, of course, but yeah, they're only 6 points off this high flying Bangor team. But the problem is they're 2 points away from Carrick.
Yeah, that's the difference, we've talked about it the whole time here. A couple of bad weeks here could really change it. Dungannon are just do what they did against Ballymena. They just seem to have that knack of getting those 50-50 games to go in their favour. I don't know what it is. Well, I do know what it is. It's a good coach and a good setup around the club. But Ballymena bringing in Warren Kerry, and that win that they got on Boxing Day, that was the game changer. This is where we're going to kick in January. We might get a few new faces in. The new coach will have his new players, and we'll just move on up the league, and we'll probably finish seventh, and everything will be hunky dory going into next year. Who knows what happens if we finish seventh? We might even get into Europe and all this kind of thing. Look at this manager we've got, top level, but it just hasn't happened like that, and they've got to be careful here that they don't really sort of go into that tailspin where a new manager's come in. They certainly haven't got a long term new manager bounce, and if they do sort of rejig the squad
I
quite a
don't think there's
lot,
been
which
any bounce.
yeah, not very well. Cole Rain was the only one that he maybe knew a wee bit too much about the opposition that they did. You know what I mean? But changing the team now, and if he does
If
bring a lot of players in,
outside of the transfers, if you were a absolute loyal Irvinite, you're
yeah,
asking
what's happening?
what's happening. Now it's super early days. I totally get that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But you would go almost as close. And look, I would say he's got two more games really in the honeymoon period, but you're close to saying this has been a bad start.
yeah. Oh, well, I don't think anybody would say it's been good at all, and close to being bad. You're right, and I know a couple of losses, and the game on Tuesday does become quite important now because fans need something to cling on to. As much as we're saying, they've got a quote unquote relegation fight for 11th. I don't see Glenavon catching Ballymena maybe, but a relegation sort of 11th spot. As much as that's something that they're going to have to play for, fans need to have something to be enjoying as well. So I think the game on Tuesday could be important, and if they were to go down to a defeat against Larne, then it sort of be, oh, this is all we've got to play for the rest of the season, and the doom and gloom might just overwhelm them a wee bit. But look, we've talked about it. These five teams down the bottom area there, it's gonna be a real dogfight for that, and I think you're gonna be talking. I mean, you're on every week. I'm only on once, but I think you're going to be talking about this quite regular.
Yes, I think so.
Over the next few weeks.
What is it? The
and months.
mid-table model, I think it was crowned
Yeah.
on here. So the lower mid-table model.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
here. Like they've brought in the signings. It was a big hurrah saying goodbye to Sean O'Neill there on Tuesday night. A draw with Cliftonville. Maybe that doesn't seem as exciting now as it did at the time. I know both teams will probably feel as though they should have got all 3 points, and there's Should there have been a red card? Should McWoods have been not judged
Yeah.
to be offside? We can talk about it.
That was his. That was actually what's on. That was his non-Semenyo moment when Semenyo got his goal in the very last kick for Bournemouth. You were thinking, oh boy,
Yeah,
Sean's going to go here in this last game here,
game.
but it was given offside, so maybe it was a bit of karma.
Well, you look at their signing. I know he's a player that I've talked about for a while. Nice way to start your Ballymena career for Igor Rakowski. 2 goals,
Mm.
one for the penalty spot, one maybe not going to be one of his more beautiful goals, but still got them. That's a positive for them. They bring in a bit of, I think, it's defensive stability here with Brad Wade coming in. So that's good. Let's go to Dungannon because they're probably thinking, we beat Ballymena. That's what we do because we're fifth now, level on points with Linfield. Linfield have one game in hand and a far superior goal difference. But look, they've had their blip. But you look at the form table, Swifts, 12 points out of the last 15. They're good.
Very good. They're very good at, just as I say, just doing those. I mean, I looked at the league and we've talked about it. Maybe there's one or two of the full-time teams that say those four and then the rest. There's not a great deal amongst them. Any team can beat anybody, even Glenavon, and we're going to talk about Glenavon in a minute. I think they've been a little bit unlucky this season in terms of results. I think they've played better. We bit like Wolves in the Premier League. Everybody talking about them, the worst team that's ever played in the Premier League. I think they're better than that. I think Glenavon are better than their points total at the minute. But they're all capable of beating each other. But I just look at it and say, but Dungannon come out on top in those games more often than they don't, those 50-50s, and they're really good at winning the games that people say this could be a real close one. I mean, when we do our previews, this could be a close one. They tend to win those games, and it's exactly that on Saturday. That's a game against Ballymena, which was to and fro. I think Dungannon had the best of it before they scored, but going into the last sort of 20 minutes, you're thinking this could be a 0-0. Ballymena could nick one here, but no, they just managed to pick up goals, and I do think that comes from their coach. I think he's just so just regimented in what he wants and what he wants to do, and you know, I always think about what Glentoran are thinking when they look back and see Rodney McAree doing a game, what he was doing at Dungannon. And the fact that he didn't kick on there and had to go back home, wanted to go back home, as it were, to Dungannon, and that okay, they went and got Declan Devine eventually, and they're doing okay. But what would have happened with Macquarie in there? Because he's just such a calming influence on the whole club. I mean, I keep using references here, but Dungannon looked to me like a Brighton or a Bournemouth or a Brentford over in England. They're just such a well-run club. No dramas at the club. You very rarely hear of things happening. The players that they bring in, there's no fanfare about the players that they bring in, but it just seems that they are able to fit into this squad every time they bring in a new player. They just seamlessly move in there, and even if it doesn't go well, they seamlessly move out again. There's no fanfare, no dramas, and I just think it's a really well-run club who get results over and above their sort of standing financially, if you want to put it that way. They're a really well-run club, and fair play to them. They're great to watch at times, and they're doing really well in the league yet again.
Knocking on the door of the top four. Their status as top six once again looks pretty safe. So
Mm.
that's looking well. And then final game of the weekend we haven't talked about. Glens going down to Glenavon. We did not see another shock. There was maybe murmurings that Glentoran were going to shoot themselves in the foot, but they stood firm, got the 2-1 victory to bounce back from that result against Larne on Tuesday evening. It's all about just trying to build bit by bit, maybe hopeful that things could go the other way for Larne. Glens are just going to try and do as well as they can, do well in the cups, trying and get this second place. They have their new transfers in, and they'll try and make them a core part of the squad. The story here is Glenavon, 3 losses on the bounce. It's a team who looked done and dusted ages ago. I think if you looked at, they've got 12 points, right? So they're 11 points off Carrick. They're 12 points off Crews, who've got the same amount of games as them, 10th. I think you if you give them 18 points, you would say it's not looking good still, and that's 2 wins. And like, this is not a surprise to anybody. Like, they're worse off than Loughgall was at this time last year, and we all know what happened to them. And that was a slow decline. Maybe they'll be technically still in it for a while, but if you were even to say, just to highlight where we are, yes, there's 14, 15 games he played, right? Up until 38. To get on even footing with Crusaders, they obviously Crews need to lose the next four. Glenavon need to win the next four. That would still only leave them with 10 games to go. So look, they've brought in nice signings. They could wreck plenty of teams wannabe 3-pointers nailed on with Ferris and Lindsay and a few others. But I think they'll keep on fighting. But as each week goes by, it looks more ominous.
I think it's with Glenavon. Like obviously, I'm the team. I'm supporting the team that's in 11th, and I've obviously got that classic fan negative outlook on life. You know what I mean? Whenever it's your team, you sort of look at the team below you. But then you do what you've just done there in a small way and look at them as the 12 points. If they were to win half of the games that they've got left, they got what 14, so that's 21 points they're going to get. Would take them to 33. So that means that if there are 15 games, Carrick have to get 10 to match that out of 15. And that's what you're looking at here. It would take one of these 4 or 5 teams to have an absolute meltdown here. And look, it's possible. It is possible, but it's unlikely to happen. And the only small grace that I would have for Glenavon is that they've only got to finish ahead of one. That's all they've got to do. They don't have to, like Linfield at the minute, have got to get above 4 teams above them, or 3, teams above them. They've got to get up there and have to have 3 teams falling down. Glenavon just need to get ahead of one. But it's a long haul. And despite the fact of what I'm saying earlier, that I think they have been better than their points suggest. They're not. When I looked at Loughgall last year, I just thought that was a team in free fall. Despite the results that they're getting. Glenavon always looked to me as if they've and they had that little spell. They've got something in them where they can get wins. They've got and adding in a bit of firepower up top, which had been sorely lacking for a good few years now. If Ferris can come in and just do something to get a few goals for them, because they're not like the Crews in that I mean, their goal tally is not great, but I mean they're not shipping goals left, right, and they're not getting beat 5 every week. They went through a spell of that early in the season, but I just think they could pick a few games, and they've got to just believe that if they can get a few wins before sort of the split, if they get three wins before the split and can just hang in there to get to the split and give themselves a chance, that's what they've got to hang on to and just give myself a chance because then when you're in the split, everything is doubled. You can pick up 3 points on your rivals fairly quickly because you're playing them every week. So you've just got to hope that you can get, even if you put your thing on the board, let's get 15 points in the split, and that'll give us a crack. So it's the only thing they can hang on to at the minute. Probably again, same thing we talked about there. A little bit of fans that they nicked through in the cup last week, just scraped through in the cup midweek
Yeah,
rather.
just about.
That was a big thing. Just about they were hanging on there, and you think that I think would have the game in the extra time they were leading in extra time of normal time rather. Injury time's what I'm grasping for there. And they had the game, but Glenavon managed to equalise and then get the game. So that's a little thing for them to hang on to. So don't be giving up hope just yet. Hang in there and see what you can. But are they starting to? It's the old thing. Do you start to plan for next year?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's a place where everybody's down in the dumps. I
No.
think Ferris is a real good feeling signing, even if it's just on loan, the fairly local boy there. But we'll see how the next few weeks goes. We'll just see. It is starting to feel as though, outside of a massive points deduction for some of the other teams around them, they're looking in depths. We'll go then just to recap maybe some of the transfers that you may have missed over the past 7 days as we recap them every week on this podcast. Mikey Harkin, a Larne player, going to Glenavon. I remember here when we had Joel Neal on the podcast, keen Larne man. He really likes this guy, Mikey Harkin. Is playing full-time Irish League football with a team even at the bottom of the league. Is he ready for that right now? That's, I guess, what these next few months we'll have to see as he goes down to Glenavon. Sam Anderson is back at Dungannon from Luton. Unfortunately, that spell with them just didn't totally work out. Linfield have got a new defender in from Waterford, isn't it? This Dara Leahy. So we will That's one that decent performance by all accounts on Saturday. That's a team I think could do with a bit more just shoring up there at the back. I thought this was a really interesting story. Cruz and Jarlath O'Rourke heading to Splitsville. Their captain that was set to have his testimonial year next year. Cruz put out this statement saying, we offered him a contract. He isn't signing the contract. GTFO.
Yep.
Very surprising, it must be said. I know that's upsetting. I'm sure it's very frustrating for a team that paid his wages. There's so much connection there. 9 years of, a really lovely relationship between the two of them. And does it really have to end this way? Where I know that I know for fans, you're like, thank you. You're telling us you tried to get this player. He isn't going to sign, and now for the club's best interest, we are trying to get a fee so he can move on and start his career elsewhere. There's chat he has signed a pre-contract with another team. I can't confirm that, but even still, it just felt a bit scorned lover.
Yeah, it seems to be becoming more and more of a thing in football in general now, that even if things have gone really well, or you've had a good relationship with a club for a long time, and that's 9 years for O'Rourke, it can just switch overnight. I mean, just look what's happening at poor old Crystal Palace across the water. I mean, they were cock a hoop 4 or 5 months ago, or when was it, May? The cup final, won a cup final, first ever trophy, and you think this guy's going to take us to the promised land here, and 5 months later he'd be going this week. He's bound to go after what he said on Saturday. So, I mean, and the fans loved him, and he was going to be the next great manager, and he's going to go. So, just to relate that back, I mean, George being there for 9 years, being through all the sort of good times, the bad times at one club, you've seen it all, and it really can just finish overnight, and then the dreaded transfer window opens, and everybody just says, this is my opportunity to get out of here. But yeah, you would like to think that testimonial coming up in a season or two, maybe a season away, I don't know. But the conversation, I'd love to be able to be in a room with the conversations that are going to be had there. What's the conversation to open that up? Declan, could I have a quick word with you here? You want to come for a coffee, or I'm away, or I want to go, or what's the conversation sort of stopper there
That's
that they go with it?
Club captain as well.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Maybe the tone of it is that what I was trying to suggest. Maybe it's not what they were intending, but it doesn't feel particularly great. But hey, that's football. We all move on. Other deals, we talked about Morrison moving back to Scotland, meeting up with good old Neil Lennon there at Dunfermline. Glenavon
That'll be a good matchup.
Glenavon had a few more bodies. I couldn't tell you much about. Is it John Mountney? He played a bit with Dundalk there. He's coming in from Bowes. Connor Falls never really kicked on with Cliftonville, so he goes to Glenavon to try and get a few more goals. I know he started there on Saturday. Joe Moore adds a bit more body. Speedster there. The Armagh Exodus continues, and he moves up to Carrick. There's a tiny bit of defensive reinforcement for Cliftonville as they welcome back Aidan Kelly, a youth player for them. I think he was with America. And then I think this is going to go under the radar, but I think it's Easton Hughes. He's went from Co-Bramblers to Bangor. Reports from people I know at Bangor. Very excited about him. Ex-Man United player he is.
Yep. Yeah, look, a bit of movement there, and I'd say it's going to keep going for the next couple of weeks here. I'd say teams will still be jostling for players, and look, it's just a bit crazy. It does go a wee bit crazy at this time of year. As I say, I remember last year Stuart King's reign at Carrick, the year before he lost his job. There was talk of, do we kick on and try and go and get a few more boys here, or do we just try and keep our powder dry until the summer and sort of use our finances then? And a lot of clubs will be in that sort of, what's our sort of prognosis for the rest of the campaign? Should we go and spend a bit of cash now to try and get to that promised land, wherever your particular promised land is, or do we just sit tight here and then go for it next year? And that's kind of what we're talking about Linfield. The likelihood is they're not going to jump into the market here, because what's really the point in terms of that? Do they keep their powder dry, keep what finance they have for the off season, and try and build a squad in the off season for next campaign? But yeah, I don't think it's going to quieten down for the next couple of weeks. It will be. I'd say you'll be doing this little segment for a couple of weeks now.
Okay, 6 games happening this weekend across Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah.
It's Jared Lawler's weekend of football, everybody, and let's see how many games survive the storm Leontia that maybe comes. I don't know. I haven't been checking what Barbest has got to say.
Yeah.
But we start on Friday, and the games that we have here, Larne are doing their Friday night things. They take on Bangor. I think this could be a wee bit closer. I'm going to be bold straight out and say that perhaps they were a bit better than it Portadown just being rubbish on Saturday. I'm going to go 1-1, Larne Bangor.
Oh, wow. I could see it being close, yeah. And the old handicap, I would say Larne are probably 2 goal favourites in that game, but I think it will be a bit closer than that. I think Bangor have been pretty stout at the back, and obviously nicking the goal there against Portadown to give them the win. Yeah, I wouldn't put you off that. I would say maybe Larne might do their usual and nick it, maybe 1-0, but I don't see an avalanche here. I think Bangor have been pretty stoic at the back, and I wouldn't go too far away from you there. I maybe wouldn't give Bangor a point, but I definitely think they'll be in with a shout going into the latter stages of the game.
People do like to think of Bangor as this young yuppie upstarts that are playing all this football, playing it out from the back and playing attacking and all this type of stuff. They can be very
They can
cynical
mix
when they
it.
want to be.
They can mix it.
They can
Yeah.
put 12 men if they're being cheeky behind the ball when they want to. They are not going to go into this game. I think they're going to stick. There's going to be no commentary, I guess, unless you're getting some sort of Larn feed. But if there was commentary from this game live, it would be Ben Arthur's cuts a lonely figure up there, because that's what he will be. He will be a lone boy, and everybody else will be worrying about trying to keep Lauren and all their tricky youngsters away from dazzling and then thumping into the back of the goal. So yeah, going to be bold 1-1, but obviously everyone expects a Larne victory there. I'm sure many people expect a Coleraine victory at home against Glenavon. It is being televised there, streamed from the showgrounds. I know in previous years when these two teams were closer in stature team wise, this is the type of game that Glenavon came up and got 3 points. I'm not feeling that bullish about it. I would say this is maybe a 2-1, and Glenavon look at the positives that the second goal came late.
Yeah, we scored. Yeah, I think probably your Glenavon guys will probably come on here and say it's wrong, but I just have a feeling that Glenavon have a good record at Coleraine over the years. I think they've done okay up there. I think they won a cup game as well. Um, but yes, I think if Coleraine, there you go. If Coleraine can play to their level, I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what it's all about, playing to your level. But yeah, look, if Coleraine play their level, I think they are capable of scoring a lot of goals, and I think they will score a few here. I think they might get three, and whether Glenavon can go on the score sheet. So I'd be saying 3-0 to Coleraine for me on that one.
Potentially, I think the most impactful game of the weekend, at least from the table, at least from where these teams are going to go over the next while. Maybe that they'll go out, they've made big moves themselves. Will they panic buy if they're on the wrong side of a result here? That then screams a draw. Ballymena Portadown up at the showgrounds.
Yep.
Neither team pulling up trees.
Where do we go with that? Jeez, it could be like you could be right there if there's a defeat there, and say Carrick or the crew's got a win and really tighten that up again. Especially if, I think if they both won, they'd go above Ballymena if they lost this. So that would set all the alarm bells ringing. Even though it's only a point, your figure beside your position in the table suddenly drops to 11, and oh my goodness, what's going on here? So, yeah, look, big game, and very similar to what I was saying about Bangor. Portadown have just managed to, even though I don't think they've played particularly well this season, they have managed to pick up wins when they really needed one. And again, referencing back to what I've seen, they picked up a really big win at Carrick a couple of weeks back, and that was a huge win. It just opened that gap again and just kept picking up 3 points every now and then, which just is so useful. It's again, you can go on a three-game draw, three draws unbeaten. Everybody says 3 games unbeaten. One win will do that. 3 points are just so much better. No, it sounds a ridiculous thing to say, an easy thing to say. 3 points are so much better than three draws. But I think this could be a draw, 30 doer draw here. I think we could be in the sort of 0-0 1-1 here if we're lucky to get a 1-1.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably where we're going. Portadown are struggling for goals
Mm.
at the minute, and maybe the fact that Ballymena aren't as much, or maybe I'm just being totally blinded by the fact that they scored twice against Cliftonville. Portadown did get a few goals in that Irish Cup ding dong between themselves and
Mm.
their old friends there in Anna United. Yeah, I'm going to be boring here and go. No, actually, I fancy this be the game that Owen Kearney gets it back 2-1 Ballymena.
There you go. 2-1 development.
And it's funny because just check the table there. Portadown are 3 points ahead of Ballymena, so that would then have them. Would they jump above them? They would jump above them. So
Yeah,
that's
it's a huge game. Yeah.
that's a big one. But in turn, it's a 6 pointer because then
Yeah.
Portadown win 6 points. Ballymena never heard of them. So a lot to play for, which probably is a draw. Here you get to bask in the glory of Rodney McAree. Are you going to give him a little fan club card when his boys come to Taylor's Avenue on Saturday? Perhaps your boys will be a bit weary from celebrating a big Antrim Shield on the Tuesday.
Yeah, or drowning sorrows and all that sort of stuff. But this was a cracking game. A few weeks back when we played Dungannon, both teams led at certain stages in the game, and Dungannon scored a 92nd minute equaliser, I think, from Sean McAllister just before he went on his full goal and scoring run when he got that hat trick as well. So he rescued a point that day, and that was really, really disappointing because actually I remember the game really well. Carrick had the ball in the 93rd minute, 92nd minute, and we're just taking it out, and you just thought, just put this down into the corners like the sort of nice that they usually would do. And they tried to play out, lost the ball, crossed into the box, and McAllister stuck it away. So that was really disappointing, and that could have been a big 3 points, as I say, to beat Dungannon. So look, it was a good game that day. Don't see anything different this weekend. Carrick have been playing, as I said earlier on, Carrick have been playing pretty well. They do tend to sit back at home more probably than away, which sounds a little bit strange that they do seem to sit back at home and let teams come onto them and try and hit them on the counter with their pace. So that could be a little bit dodgy against Dungannon because they've got a little bit of quality there as well. So I would like to see them sort of go for it a little bit and try and take it to Dungannon. So look, I referenced earlier Dungannon seemed to be over the line here. So look, I'm going to be at the game. So let's have a goal fest there. We'll go for another two each.
Yeah, I think so as well. Took the words right out of my mouth. 2-2, I think, but that's based on the fact that Carrick just keep on scoring. Cruise Linfield, how many for Linfield?
None. None. They've been struggling. I'm going to say that Cruz might get one over on them here.
Wow.
That could be the end of Linfield's small title challenge. Just with the off-field stuff going on, I just don't think it's a happy place at Windsor at the minute. And going away to the Cruise, I think. I just think they might be up for this one. Like there's been battles had in the years past between these two sides. I just think Crusaders might nick this one and sort of again concertina it up. And as I said earlier, if they were to get this result against Linfield, Carrick were to beat Dungannon, then that really would sort of concert. It might be the death knell of Glenavon possibly, but
Big time.
but it would concertina that sort of seventh to 11th up really, really, really big time. So look, I'm gonna. That's my big shade for the weekend. I think the Cruise might beat Linfield.
No, I think it's maybe 2-1 Linfield, perhaps, or maybe just a 1-0, but I think they might sneak one here. Don't know it's going to be pretty. I think it might be penalties and dodgy corners galore. And then we're going to wrap up Glentoran, Cliftonville. I don't know. Like I'm really starting to feel as though Cliftonville are going to run out of juice here. They've got a spark in Brian Haley. That's the right move at the right time, but he can't be a one man team with Mick Stravic trying to pull passes in midfield.
Yeah, it could be one of these ones that we'll maybe revisit this on Wednesday morning to see how Tuesday night's gone. If they've won the County Antrim Shield, it might just give them that little fill up. If they haven't, just the run they're on at the minute and everything as I mentioned earlier, what's going on behind the scenes. That could be the biggest story at Cliftonville this week, as to say. And if things don't go well off the pitch, on the pitch in the next few days, then Saturday could be a tricky one at Glentoran. And again, the Glens, I think you mentioned earlier, should be certainly targeting second. And if it really goes well, then they might get back into a title race. But I think they should be targeting second, and they've got to start winning these types of games. They've got to beat the Cliftonvilles and then hope they can sort of turn over Coleraine and when they play them. So I think the Glens could win this 2-0.
I quite like Glens in this. Think it's going to be maybe a 3-1 or so. Could be 2-0 easily there. So yeah, good change of course, but I strongly back the Glens. And that's our fare for this weekend. You'll be delighted to know the weekend after that. For now, well, it's 5 games at 3 o'clock. Almost had all 6, and then Portadown and Carrick have a wee half-fiver. So there's a day of football rather than the weekend of football. Can you believe it? But we always end podcasts with your fine self, Ali, because you're a man of many sports, chatting about cricket. I don't know if many Irish League fans follow it that deeply, but I always want to know how the boys who not in green but have a wee green logo on their
they are in green. They are in green.
For the wee fancy.
White ball cricket. We're in greens. Yeah, it's
whatever it is.
Six
Six
only
balls.
The fancy test match stuff that we wear whites. It's now a coloured game. Yeah, it's a coloured kit, so we're in green. Yeah, so look, we had a bit of a chat before we came on here that really strangely in the winter time. Obviously everybody thinks that cricket's a summer game, but all 3 Irish international teams, the under-19s, the men's and indeed the women's team, are all involved in World Cups in the next 2 months. The 19s and the women are in theirs at the minute, and the men go off to Sri Lanka next month to play in their World Cup. So this will probably be the busiest time for myself in terms of cricket for the next summer. When we get to the summer, we don't play any games at home, so it is a little bit spot. Bit of an Irish thing, but very, very busy at the minute with the 3 teams away. Very, very big for the women's team. They're in a qualifier to try and get to the full World Cup, which is in England this year. So that's a huge thing for the women's team. If they can get their World Cup in England, we maybe wouldn't hear that old thing about do they even play cricket in Ireland, because it'll be front and centre in the summer because it goes in England, and obviously very, very accessible for people to get across to and watch. So it'll be a big tournament if the girls can get there. They won their first game today, and they need to finish in the top 4 of that qualifying tournament. So something, even if people are not really involved in cricket, something to keep your eye on, to try and see if the women can get through to a World Cup. And then, as I say, that leads quite nicely into the men's team who are in Sri Lanka to play their World Cup T20 stuff. So quite busy for me, and if you're into your cricket in
get
any
the
way,
plug
shape,
in.
or form,
Go on, get
the
it
plug in. Yeah, get the plug in. I've got my own podcast there with my good friend Nathan Johns, who's over in England. We have the Irish Cricket Podcast, which is really, I know you had a bit of a think about your name, but we just decided we couldn't be bothered spending millions on thinking of a name, so we just called it the Irish Cricket Podcast.
Well, the joy about that is that I'm sure if you search Irish Cricket Podcast, it'll
it's
come
us.
up.
It's us.
Which is why I am called Kicking Match and Irish League Podcast.
An Irish League Podcast.
Get that SEO sorted, brother. Cut
Your
to the
analytics
mix.
kick in.
There you go. 2 stumps or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Ali, a pleasure as always. Enjoy life on the 18th floor at Taylor's Avenue in the big, whatever it is.
Big grey box.
The big grey box in the sky. Lovely to chat to you. All the best in bowling land, and I'll chat to you soon.
Will do, mate. Thank you.
Big thanks to Ali for chatting football and a wee bit of cricket along the way. It's very nice of him, of course. Go on there. Follow his podcast about Irish cricket if that's your thing. But if the thing you listen to for the past hour and a bit is your thing, Irish League Football, Kick a Match the podcast, go follow me on whatever platform you're on. If it's Spotify, if it's Apple Podcasts, go to the Kicking Match main page on that platform of choice. Hit follow, hit subscribe, whatever the vernacular is for that platform, as it will give you a little notification every time I drop a podcast like I did this week. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time. Make sure you're following me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, MySpace, whatever. It's Kicking Match and all them except one. Chat to you soon. Bye-bye.